Have you ever taken your boat cover off or come back off the water just to find there's a new chip in your boat which wasn't there before? The good news is it's probably just a chip in the gel coat. And the even better news is that today I'm going to show you how to fix it. First things first, what is Gelcoat? Gelcoat is a paint which is used to cover fiberglass. Everything you see on the outside of your laser is Gelcoat. And if you have a chip in your Gelcoat, your boat is still going to be watertight. So I'm now going to run you through a list of the items you need to fix Gelcoat chips on your boat. So the first thing you're obviously going to need is Gelcoat. So this is a tin of laser grey color match Gelcoat. You can use any Gelcoat really, but ideally you're going to use a Gelcoat which is already color matched to the color of your boat. If you can't get that, what you can also do is buy tins of white Gelcoat and then mix them with a Gelcoat tint, which is kind of like a color, to try and get as close as possible as you can to your original boat color. And the next thing you're going to need is this, which is a catalyst. So this type of catalyst for Gelcoat is known as MEKP, or methyl ethyl ketone peroxide. And you need to use this to mix with the Gelcoat so that it actually gets hard. The next item you're going to need are a set of plastic safety gloves. If you get Gelcoat on your hands, it's not the end of the world, but it's also not ideal and probably not great for your skin, especially the catalyst. So it's best to use a set of these. The next thing you'll also need is a set of scales. To make sure our Gelcoat hardens properly, we're going to want to weigh our Gelcoat and our catalyst when we mix them together. So you want to have a good set of accurate scales so you can make sure you're getting the right proportion. So the other thing we're going to need is a coffee cup, one of the paper with the sort of wax inside finishes. These are really good because the Gelcoat doesn't melt them when it's hardening, and obviously you can just throw them away and buy them cheaply. Then for mixing the Gelcoat, you're going to want to use a popsicle stick or a wooden skewer. You can also use a paintbrush, but obviously you'll probably have to throw that out after one use, so it's not the most cost-effective tool. You're also going to want to use masking tape. So masking tape comes in handy when you're putting the Gelcoat on the boat. You use the masking tape to tape around the repair area so that the fresh Gelcoat or the wet Gelcoat doesn't spill over to the rest of the boat, which doesn't need to be repaired. The other thing you're going to need is some sandpaper. You're going to use this both for preparing the area which you want to repair, and then also for sanding back the repair after it's hardened so that it's in the original form. Another important item, acetone. So you're going to use this to clean the area which you're going to be repairing. Before you put the fresh Gelcoat on, you don't want any dust or dirt to be in the chip, because that can affect how well the Gelcoat will harden and sit in the area that you're repairing. And the last thing, which you definitely should use, but I often don't use because I get a little bit lazy about it, is a set of safety glasses. Even though it's very unlikely you'll get anything anywhere near or in your eyes, if the catalyst for Gelcoat does get in your eyes, it can be pretty bad. So especially if you're just starting out doing this, I would strongly recommend using those because your eyes are very valuable. So I just wanted to show you guys what a Gelcoat chip actually looks like. So we can see here there's a little chip in the centerboard case in this boat. As you can see, this is the fiberglass layer below where the Gelcoat's covering. So the boat's still completely watertight, but there obviously is some Gelcoat missing, which isn't great, and that's going to rub against the centerboard, so we want to fix that up. Now let's go through the repair process step by step, but before I do that, I'd really appreciate it if you guys subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be coming out with a heap more laser sailing content in the future. which I'm sure you guys will find just as valuable as this video. Now, onto the repair. So the first thing we're going to do is to clean and prepare the chip for the new gel coat, which we're going to paint on. And the first step in doing that is to take some sandpaper. This is pretty rough. This is like a 320 sandpaper. You don't have to do this wet. You're basically just going to sand around the area, around the chip, just so the edges aren't as sharp. And then rough sandpaper will also create like a fine little grooves in the chip, which the gel coat will then stick to better. And so you're just going to rough it up a little bit. Doesn't have to be too much, like that. And now the next step is to use the masking tape to tape around the chip so that when we do put on the wet gel coat, it doesn't spill over into areas which don't need to be repaired. So I'm just going to do this in little bits. So taping as close as possible to the chip so that afterwards, when we have to sand back the new gel coat, we have to do as little sanding as possible. And then I'm also going to get some tape inside the centerboard case. See, just there, just below the chip, so that if any gel coat runs down and into the centerboard case, it's mostly just going to run onto the tape, and then we can pull the tape off easily once the repair's hardened. And so that's good like that. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to take some spare pieces of tape, and I'm just going to put them near the repair area, because once we paint the wet gel coat onto the chip, we can then use these bits of tape to basically cover the wet gel coat so that it then doesn't run at all, and we'll have a better shape, or a shape which is more similar to the original shape of the chip, and just means we have to do less sanding afterwards. So the whole goal here is basically to minimize the amount of sanding you have to do afterwards, because you also don't want to have to sand any of the gel coat which is still intact around the chip. And now that we've marked off the area that we want to repair, what I've done now is I've just poured a little bit of the acetone onto this paper towel, and I'm going to use that to just clean up the area that we're repairing, so all around the chip. And I'm just going to soak it a little bit. And as I mentioned earlier, that's basically just to make sure there's no dust or dirt inside the chip, and when the fresh gel coat goes on there, it's going to stick well and not be hindered by any of the debris inside the chip. And so, yeah, as I said, I'm just using paper towel for the acetone now. Normally, I'd recommend using a proper rag, but this is all I had with me, so this will have to do. And as you can see, I'm using my gloves for this. You don't really want to get the acetone on your hands. And so the next step is that we now need to mix the gel coat. So with my newspaper laid down, because we don't want to get gel coat on our nice tablecloth, I've got my scales and the coffee cup with the scale set at 0. And then I'm going to put my gloves on. We're going to open the gel coat. We're going to pour the gel coat into the coffee cup. Then we are going to make sure we get the right amount of catalyst, and we'll mix it. And I'll show you guys that all from a bit closer of an angle. Before we do that though, one of the important things you should do before you get started with this is actually shake your gel coat tin a bit. So there's a sort of substance in the gel coat which can rise to the top if it hasn't been mixed properly, and that's going to affect the results you get. So you just want to give that a good shake to make sure that everything is mixed in together. So change the camera angle, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the Gelcoat tin, and I'm just using a flat blade screwdriver for that. So you can see our laser grey Gelcoat there, which is available in the description in the link in the description box below. This is the laser grey Gelcoat for PSA made boats. And you can see we've got our scale set. I've got my gloves on. So now I'm just going to pour a little bit into the cup. We don't need too much because it's a small repair. And luckily I've got my paper towel here to wipe up that excess. As you can see, guys, this can get a little messy, and I'm sure there's better ways to do this, but this is how I've done it for now. And this is why we want to make sure that everything around us is protected. Okay, so I've got basically 26 grams of Gelcoat in the cup now. I don't think you guys can see that, but this is very, very important. You basically want to have 2 to 5% the amount of Gelcoat in catalyst. So what does that mean? In our case, we've got 26 grams, which means 10% would be 2.6 grams of catalyst, and 5% would be 1.3 grams of catalyst. So we basically want somewhere between 0.6 grams and 1.3 grams of catalyst. And so I'm going to open my catalyst, and you can basically pick how much catalyst you want based on the weather that you're doing the repair in. So when it's warmer or sunnier, you might need a little less catalyst, but if it's colder or not as sunny, you might need a little bit more. Today is pretty warm and sunny, so I'm going to go a little bit closer towards 2% than 5%. And it's also just going to affect how quickly the repair will harden as well. So using my scales and my catalyst dropper, going to go for about 0.7 or 0.8 grams of catalyst. So that's 0.6 there, and that's 0.7. Might go a little bit more. It's 0.8 there. So as long as you're in that range, guys, you'll be pretty good. As I mentioned, if you do too much, it can mean your repair ends up a little brittle, and it will dry quite quickly. And if you do too little, it's going to take a very, very long time to harden. So I'm just going to mix that all together. And now we are ready to go. All right, so now that we have our Gelcoat mixed together with the catalyst, we are now going to apply it to our chip. And this Gelcoat can be pretty runny, so I would recommend always starting off with less than you think you need, and then adding more over time. Because, as I mentioned at the start of the video, one of our goals here is basically to minimize the amount of sanding that we have to do afterwards. And if you put excess Gelcoat, then you're going to have to do more sanding once it's hardened. I'm just using my wooden skewer here and gently applying the Gelcoat to the chip. And the other thing as well, guys, with a chip like this in an area which is kind of like curved on the boat, it might be a little difficult to get the exact right shape on the first go. So you may actually need to do it in multiple batches, or wait for this one to apply this now, let that harden a bit, and then add more Gelcoat over time, just so you can kind of build it up to the right shape of the hull. this is actually sticking pretty well here. So I'm just going to be very gentle when I'm putting this on, just to make sure that I can try and build it up a bit and get the right shape. As you can see here, I'm sort of just playing around with the gel coat, just moving it around gently, trying to get it so that it completely fills up the area where gel coat was previously, and so that it sort of matches the curve of the edge of the centerboard case here. Okay, I think that's going to be pretty good. And it doesn't really look like it's going to be running at all. So I actually used way too much catalyst already, because that's already starting to go hard. So in the end, because I used too much catalyst, I don't really need to be using this tape to mold it at all, so that's just unnecessary, and now we just need to sit and let it dry basically. So I'm gonna let that gel coat dry for a few hours now, just to make sure that it's properly hard before I start sanding it. But in the meantime, and whilst I'm waiting on that, I thought I'd give you guys a couple of sort of insider hacks or insider tricks that you should probably know before you do this. The first one is that after you're finished with your gel coat tin, it's very, very, very important that you take some masking tape and tape around the lid or the cap to the tin, because the gel coat can leak through the tin and you don't want that spilling everywhere. And the second tip is that keep hold of the coffee cup you used for mixing the gel coat, because as the gel coat in the coffee cup hardens, you can use that as a good indicator for when your repair will be finished. So you just let this coffee cup sit somewhere safe, and once it's fully hard, you can be pretty certain that the gel coat you put onto the boat is also going to be hard. And the third thing that I want to point out is that this tutorial or these tips don't apply just for repairing the hull. You can also use this on the centerboard and rudder, which are also made of gel coat. So any chips there, like in the trailing edge, for example, on the leading edge, or any part of your foils which have, other white sort of gel coat color, you'll be able to repair using the same techniques you saw in this video. So the gel coat has fully hardened now. It's been about 5 to 6 hours since I put it on there. And so now I'm going to show you guys the final step, which is sanding back the gel coat so that your boat is looking as good as new. So the important thing is, when sanding the boat or sanding the gel coat repair, is that you always want to wet and dry sand the gel coat. So you never want to sand it with just dry sandpaper. You always want to do it with water. And that's because wet sanding basically means that the gel coat doesn't heat up when you're sanding it, because if it does heat up, then it's going to degrade the gel coat. So I've got here a bucket of water. I've got my sandpaper. This is the sandpaper I used earlier when I was roughing up the original chip. So it's like a 320 grit, I think, something like that. And I'm just going to dip my sandpaper in the water. And now I'm just going to sand with the masking tape still on there. Try and get that repair back to its original shape. you'll see as I'm getting closer and closer to the original shape, I'm just taking that masking tape off so that we can get the repair perfectly flush or level with the original gel coat. So I finished sanding the gel coat, and it's basically exactly as it would be if the boat were new. There's a couple of little like indents in the repair where I just didn't put enough gel coat so that it would fill out completely. But because this is on the centerboard case, I'm not too worried about it. If this were on the hull, for example, as in the bottom side of the hull, then you'd be a bit more concerned about it, and you'd probably want to do a second layer of gel coat just to make sure you can get it exactly as it would normally be. And so on that note, I wanted to give a couple of tips about the sanding process, because it is going to differ depending on where you do the repair. So for me, because this chip was on the centerboard case, I'm not really that concerned about getting it 100% shiny or up to the finish of a brand new boat. But for example, if you're repairing something on the foils or on the underside of the hull, you're going to be a bit more worried about getting that finish perfect so that it doesn't affect the performance of your boat. And so assuming you've put the correct amount of gel coat and you've sanded it back to a level which is flush with the original hull, so it's exactly as it was pre-chip, then the next step that you're going to need to do to get it back to the shiny finish is you're going to have to work your way up finer and finer grits of sandpaper to get it to the original finish. So what that means is, in this case, for example, I started at a 320 grit. If you wanted to make the finish perfect from 320, once the shape's good, you might go up to something like a 600, and then you basically make the repair finer again, and then from a 600 you might go to something like 1,000 grit sandpaper, and then even up to like 1,500, 2,000 if you want to get a really perfect finish. And then after that, if you want that fully sleek look, you're going to have to polish the boat. So you're going to use a really fine polish at that point, because basically what you've been doing at this in this entire process is making the little scratches on the repair really small, and then the polish is the final step in that, because what a polish basically does is it cuts those little scratches even more so that you can't even see them, or it looks like mirror-like basically. So you're going to need to work up to that level with the sandpaper, and then you get the polish out, and you can either machine polish or hand polish, and that will get rid of those final like tiny micro scratches from the sandpaper and restore it to that sort of mirror glossy finish that you get with a new boat. So that's all from this video. If you found this video helpful and it's going to help you repair your laser, make sure you head over to the link in the description box where you can sign up to my newsletter. I send out emails every 2 weeks with heaps of tips and tricks about how you can become a better sailor.